The Spin-Off Podcast Network. Skinny are helping you show how smart you are with the 1Q quiz, an all-new, super challenging and super quick daily quiz built by the Spin-Off. Every Monday, Skinny are giving you the chance to prove you're smart with the Skinny Extra Credit question. Get it right, and you'll get the chance to score yourself some Skinny Extra mobile credit, so you can text, call, or even video call your group chat and gloat about how big your brain is. T's and C's apply.
The Fold is brought to you by Bauer Media, making brands unmissable and public spaces better across Aotearoa. Kia ora and welcome to The Fold. This week my guest is Sido Kitchin, who is an absolute legend of magazines in New Zealand and just the media industry generally. Comes from one of those families where you just see the name crop up periodically and wonder if they're related. They are all related. They're all from the same family. The Kitchens are one of like the Nevilles or any number of others. There's just a few families that have really made media their home. But Sido might well be the most prominent and dominant of them, and she has made women's media her space. She has worked in publicity at TVNZ in the absolute glory days, and we get to that, and it'll kind of, if you work in the media still, or if you're used to, you'll kind of, your heart will break a bit thinking, hearing about her, taking a helicopter to go and get Judy Bailey for a photo shoot, because that's the kind of budgets that existed back then. But also she, has edited the Women's Weekly, Women's Day, and has now just launched at School Road Publishing 4 brand new titles. Obviously it's been a year of immense turmoil in the magazine industry, the fall of Bauer, but also the huge flowering of independence that we've seen. But no one has moved so hard and aggressively as Sido and School Road. So hearing about the collapse of Bauer, how it was impacted by the government ban on magazines, how close she came to acquiring Women's Weekly, and then the quite interesting process by which School Road came to be is fascinating to me. And honestly, the reflection of confidence in magazines in New Zealand that it implies, because I think for a lot of people, and she sort of resists this characterization quite strongly, there was this idea that Bauer's collapse meant that Bauer was basically, an unprofitable business that was always going to fall. It was a question of when. I mean, what Sido said, and she should know, is that it really wasn't that way, and that's why she has been so comfortable in launching 4 titles into this very uncertain environment. We pick up with Monday, when she put the first of them, a bi-weekly title called Women to Bed, and the emotion of that moment, and then just go where the conversation leads. I think it's a really good chat. I really do wish her well. I think the independent media needs the energy. I would love to think that the energy that's in the space right now continues, and I think with people like Sido there who've got this amazing sort of track record and history, there's a really good shot at it. So yeah, have a listen. Kia ora, Sido.
Kia ora.
And welcome to The Fold.
Lovely to meet you, Duncan.
Lovely to meet you too. I mean, I feel like it's a failing on my part to have not. I've been at tables with you, long lunch tables, and watched you work the room, but I've never actually met you before. Which is, like I say, it feels like a fault, because your career has been just, enormous in terms of what you've done. But I want to start with the literally the most recent part of it, which is that you have just put the first issue to bed of Woman. The first magazine from your new stable. Tell me how that feels and what that process was like.
Oh, I've had ups and downs over the last 48 hours. I went home on Monday night, I drove from Stanley Street, where we're based, onto the motorway. Got off at Western Springs, where I live, and on that short drive, there was no traffic on the motorway. It was about 9 o'clock at night. There was an Annie Lennox ballad playing on Coast, and I got overwhelmed. I had a moment, and I keep my composure at times like this normally, but I did have a moment. I got a bit teary. Could have been Annie Lennox. Could have been the fear of a grammatical error turning up in my magazine. But I think it was I'm just overwhelmed with joy, to be honest. I love deadline days on magazines. I love deadline night. It's where everyone laughs, they go a bit nutty, and everybody's working so hard to try and make it as good as they can. And then yesterday, Tuesday, the mag actually got sent to the printers. So it was interesting during the morning. It was a hive of activity. There was so many people. One News came in with the cameras and it just looked so buzzy. There was so many people. There was so much going on. Then I went out to check the cover, to do press pass the cover out at Whitty, and got there and got to see my final, proofs of the cover, which was another amazing moment. I was a bit more composed, I have to say. I was feeling pretty pleased and proud, nervous, but pleased and proud. But then I drove back on the motorway, came back to the office, and there was nobody there. It was completely dead. So I sat by myself and had a beer and sort of cleared my desk, because I had all these mock-ups of covers, shoved them in the Tampa unit because I'm useless at with my paperwork. I just hid it away and went, I guess that's it. Now I've got to do another one in a fortnight.
I mean, because that's the thing that I miss most. Like, I've worked in magazines, and now we're in a digital publication, obviously. But there's something about the rhythm, that frenzy you just described. I was like, I miss that.
Yeah, yeah.
And then that beautiful void, like the best time, in my opinion, of any editor's life, is the void between it having gone to the printers but before it's come back, and any mistakes, whatever, they're off in the
you can't do much about it.
You can't do anything about it.
I mean, I went out with my son to our local Japanese sake bar over the road here in Morningside last night, and I had my proof in my bag, and he took a look at it and he went, he's only 11, but he patted my shoulder and said, "This is nice, Mum. I'm really proud of you, Mum. Thanks for inviting me out. Thanks for dinner." I was like, okay, another choky moment. So yeah, it's been a moment. But now I guess I've got to wait till it actually hits the shelves, and women will soon decide whether they like it or not. It's a bit like you want everyone to love your baby, right? It's like, so yeah, there's a bit of a wait now. I guess I've produced a magazine which is much more true to me. I know that. I know it's much more me than anything else I've ever done. And I really think that magazines reflect their editors. But I've always done magazines, I've always edited magazines that I guess had a formula. And you can evolve them a little. But, at the end of the day, the Women's Day, New Zealand Women's Weekly, they've been there for long before me, and I was just a custodian. So you could only do so much. But actually to be given a blank canvas and say, what would you like to do? It's a pretty incredible opportunity. It's a challenge, but a welcome one. So now I'm like, okay, I got that opportunity. I've done it. Let's just hope people like it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's rewind 6 months to where this moment sprang from, which was the collapse of Bauer. Do you want to? I mean, I feel like this will be at least the 3rd podcast out of the spin-off that has discussed that, but I don't know, and I'm sure our listeners won't ever tire of hearing about that, because it was an event unlike anything our media has ever seen. Talk me through that day, and then the process of picking yourself up and ultimately getting here.
My heart's beating just thinking about it, to be honest, because I worked in media for 30 years, and I guess if you work in media, you always know a redundancy is a possibility, but I always thought I'll just ride this joyous wave as long as I can, because I just loved every job I've done. I've loved. I've been very blessed like that. But yeah, I didn't see that day coming. And people always ask me that, because I was managing editor of the mass market women's titles. So I was across Australian Women's Weekly, New Zealand Women's Weekly, and Women's Day, and Lucky Break. So I had a big stable of magazines to look after. People saying, "You must have known. You must have seen it coming." I really didn't. Even when I went on that Zoom call that morning. April 2nd, someone told me the other day. It's only 6 months ago. I really didn't see any of that coming. So, I mean, I hate to go back and reflect on it that day in particular. It's really still pretty raw, and I guess I'm in a much more optimistic space right now. But, I couldn't take it personally, but you can't help. I mean, I now know, it's not personal, but you can't help it. At the time, I had such a personal relationship with I felt like I had such a personal relationship with my readers in particular and my team. So, yeah, it was brutal. It was really, really tough. And at the time, not being able to get together with all your mates from work as a leader was really tough. Not being able to go to the pub, not being able to wrap my arms around them. All I could do was send an email, and pick up the phone and talk to people. Thank God the sun was shining. Yeah, it was really, really tough. So, I mean, I was really incredibly proud after the shutdown at Bauer at how many of my team picked themselves up and were just so productive and creative, but I was inert for a while. I really couldn't do anything. I've got 2 kids at home, and a dog, which was fantastic. I had the dog at that time. I thought actually, when you go through something like that, to be at home with your family and really think about what's most important in life, it was I was pleased to be at home with the family. As much as I kind of felt like I should be with my team, it was actually really nice to be forced to be home to heal, really. So then I didn't do anything for a while, and just walked the dog. Enjoyed that time in some ways, but I've never been unemployed before, so I did, and I've always been the main breadwinner, so that was pretty tough, actually, just thinking, what's next? I got redundancy, I was made redundant, but that figure only ever goes down, doesn't it? And I couldn't go on job seeker. I was like, what happens now? I don't know. So I was worried for a while. I thought I had to choose a new career, to be honest. I thought,
because it was in that period of time, it felt like Bauer was the first, but it wasn't necessarily going to be the only. Because things have stabilised and recovered since, I think we forget just how cataclysmic that moment felt. So I totally understand thinking it's a new career, not a new media venture. Yeah,
and I know I know my boss was, fighting the government decision for us to be deemed non-essential, and I was hanging on to that hope.
Can we talk about that? Because I reported on some of this at the time, and there was a real dispute. The government was very firm that this decision was not related to the decision to make them non-essential, which I still believe was a bad decision. What's your take on it? And do you think it was justified, the decision to, I remember
to deem us non-essential?
Yeah, and
I think that was a misstep. I really do. I mean,
the only item in the supermarket.
Nowhere else in the world. I just don't believe in shutting down media at times like this. Full stop. And if you can, as a magazine or any type of media, I think media has such a critical role at sharing information. And I thought about New Zealand Women's Weekly in particular, and the Listener. These magazines they are media. You can't say they're not media.
Well, just the pace of them doesn't dictate the function of them.
Absolutely, we're still sharing really critical information. And for me, it was also about those thousands, tens of thousands of subscribers. Many of them lonely and at home and isolated at this time. And I really thought, I thought, because it didn't happen straight away that we, after lockdown, that we were produced from a couple of issues from home, and we were all sort of united, and for these subscribers in particular, thinking, they'll have this one communication with the outside world. I thought of the rest homes who couldn't have visitors. I was thinking at least their subscription wrapped in plastic is going to get through. But anyway, it's the past now. But I think the government did an incredible job leading us through that time. But of course it's my area, but I think that was a mistake.
Do you think that was the straw that broke the camel's back? I mean, there was a dispute. It never was resolved about whether, had that decision not been made, whether Bauer would have sort of toughed it out, or whether they were just looking for an excuse.
Bauer was Bauer New Zealand was a very profitable company and doing exceptionally well. And I know that year on year we were doing really, really well. And that's quite hard to watch all those headlines, assuming that we were, having catastrophic times, because we were doing really, really well. So, I mean, I don't know. There's only probably a handful of people that know the truth. But what was clear, they definitely wanted out of the Australian New Zealand market. It wasn't just the New Zealand market. I guess the Mercury private equity deal has been on the table for quite some time. So, I wonder if these two things were linked. But anyway, I don't really know for sure. All I know is that it was a really profitable, successful business here in New Zealand, and magazines are. We love magazines in New Zealand. There's still a place for them. So,
and was that must have been when you did pick yourself up off the floor and decided, unfortunately, the hooks were in and you couldn't just change career. Tell me about how you ultimately came to launch not just one, but like a whole stable of magazines.
There was a step in between which I haven't really talked about, but this is there was a point when I realised that they were bringing in the Australian issues of Women's Day and AWW. They're just bringing in the Australian issues. I remember getting that call and thinking that made sense from a business decision. They're going to just keep bringing them in. They'll be hugely profitable. They'll do really well. It made sense. It was great to see the mastheads back on the shelf, but without any New Zealand content. And I kind of was hoping for a role in that, to be honest. I was thinking, how can I get New Zealand stories? It's always for me about New Zealand stories. How can I get New Zealand stories? And anyway, in that time, it was actually Sophie Neville that said to me, who's my associate editor, she said, maybe we're going to have to do something. Maybe it's up to us. And I was like, I hadn't been mentally and emotionally up for thinking like that. I was just sort of hoping someone would buy one of these magazines I loved, and potentially I could get a role then. That's how I was thinking. I hadn't. Yeah. Anyway, I ended up trying to buy the weekly, New Zealand Women's Weekly, and I spent months on that, and I think I came really, really, really close. So I had, it was interesting because I love Women's Day, don't get me wrong. I was the editor for nearly 10 years, but at this time, in a pivotal time in history, suddenly New Zealand Women's Weekly and its role meant so much to me. That's the magazine that, I edited it for 5 years. It was the first magazine I edited, and it's a bit like your first boyfriend. He's always got a place in your heart,
And it feels like if you were to describe the sort of 4 or 5 most significant magazines in New Zealand history, the Weekly would be one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, Women's Day was the most profitable mag in the whole stable for Bauer, so it got a lot of attention from me. But I always loved New Zealand Women's Weekly, so I went down the acquisition route, and I actually rang John Barnett, who was I used to work for when I was a publicist. He was the head of South Pacific Pictures for many years, a great producer of New Zealand film and television, and his passion is telling New Zealand stories, which is like mine. We just do it through different vehicles. So I just rang him up to say, do you think this is a good idea? And we had a conversation. He said, I think it's a great idea. And he offered to help. So he didn't just offer to help. He also put his heart and soul into me, into the acquisition of the magazine. And we came really close. But at the 11th hour, we'd written the press release.
Oh my God, that's really close.
We had the chairwoman from the board. We were all geared up. And we would have been on shelves. They delayed that acquisition process, but we would have been on shelves early July, so that would have been months ago. And that was another blow. So right at the 11th hour, they pulled it from, obviously the sale of Bauer to Mercury happened in the background right at that time.
And they just decided to keep it.
And they decided to hang on to the 6 most profitable magazines in the stable. So
crazy.
So I always thought, it is what it is, but I always thought New Zealand Women's Weekly would only thrive under local independent ownership. But John Barnett was incredibly generous with his time and his wisdom, and I'm so grateful. I learnt so much through that process. He was such a good man, and so he was there to back me, and I was sorry I couldn't do it for him, and I think he was sorry it didn't go through for me. And so, but anyway, I'm still grateful for the process, and I haven't given up hope that magazine may one day be back in local ownership. In the meantime, though. So that was another disappointment, and I guess I kept that one pretty close to my chest. There were only a couple of people that knew about it, so they probably just thought I was sitting there like a lump at home, doing nothing, and sort of 4 months on.
As a kind of sit at a lump at home kind of a person, to be honest.
You don't know me that well, Duncan. There'll be people hearing. People know that I was sort of attached to my beanbag with my beer in hand for quite a while there. So then out of the blue, obviously they announced Bauer 2, as they were calling it, were coming back, but they didn't have a role for me there, which is probably another hurt. But anyway.
Given all that you've done,
I don't know. But anyway, at the same time, weirdly out of the blue, I got a call from Greg Partington about who I knew the name, but I didn't really know him. And he said, "Do you want to come and see me?" And that was that's not that long ago. It's the last week of July.
It really isn't that long ago.
I mean, weirdly, I have no concept of time in the last 6 months, to be honest. Someone told me that April 2nd was 6-month anniversary on Sunday. I was like, whoa, I've got no idea. It feels like 3 years. It feels like 2 months. I've got no concept of time this year. But anyway, he gave me a call and said, "Would you like to come on?" And I don't know how much I should say about this, but he had been looking at acquisition too, and also had titles he was keen on pulled So he's a man that absolutely loves magazines. And he's quite a private man, so he's been very, he which is a shame for you, Duncan, because he'd be in a brilliant interview sometime. He is a really brilliant man. But yeah, he just said, "Look, I'd like to set up a magazine publishing business, and I'd like you to run it for me." And I thought, really? What would you do? And so we sort of weighed up, there was still some sort of acquisition discussions on the table, and this idea of starting 4 fresh new magazines. I don't know where the number 4 came from. I think I made it up. I really think I did make it up. I mean, you get offered these opportunities. And so I was sort of weighing up the financials for both. And, one would have had recognisable mastheads that, would have attracted advertisers quickly, and the other one's more of a long-term game, I guess.
But you need some scale and breadth to be able to get in front of media agencies and get them excited.
Yeah.
So 4 seems like a number.
Yeah, that's true. So we put the acquisition idea behind us, actually. We both fell in love with the idea of starting these new, fresh titles. I mean, if there was ever going to be a time to do it, it's now. Everyone's attitudes, life is different. It's changed. I don't think we can speak to people in the same way we spoke to them a year ago because it's different. The world has changed, especially for, I think, women's magazine readers in particular. I talk about women because they are the main purchasers of magazines in New Zealand. So anyway, he invited me in, and I guess I came up with those 4 pillars for the magazines. I started August 3. I only worked that out the other day. I wanted to send an email to the team to say thanks for all your hard work getting the first issue of Woman to bed, and I looked back at my email saying, how long have we been here? And it was August 3 was my first day in the job. I found an email to the guy in IT saying, help.
So that was two months ago to the day before deadline day.
Yeah. So he was very clear that, this is I shouldn't talk about Greg too much because he likes to say well behind the scenes. He's a very private man, but I have to mention him because I'm just so thankful and grateful for the opportunity. I've worked in media for a long, long time, but I've never been given this opportunity to start something from scratch. So that's an amazing opportunity. He's given me incredible freedom and independence. He doesn't know what these things are going to look like. He's got no idea. He says, "I'm not your audience." He doesn't. I came up with these 4 pillars. We came up for the mastheads. We actually did we put it out to the wider. I sent out the
piece of research.
I sent it out. And so I think I came up with woman. I always wanted it to be woman right from the beginning.
Yeah.
But I guess in my head, I thought about those 4 pillars, and I thought, Greg, I knew he wanted to do a home title. And it's quite a cluttered market, to be honest. But
it's slightly less cluttered now than it was 6 months ago.
Yeah, but there's still quite a few magazines in that territory. But I guess all of them are reasonably upmarket. And he, the only thing he did say is that I want these to be broad in their appeal. So I thought that was home magazine. I think I thought of a well-being magazine. There wasn't really a New Zealand well-being magazine, and I thought at a time when everyone's prioritising their health and well-being like never before. This was the time to do a local magazine, and then a domestic travel magazine, Scout. I thought, we can't go anywhere else.
So let's talk about Scout. What made you think that name was ready for rehabilitation after...
I hadn't even thought about the
Glissina.
Our friend Tamar Munch pointed that out to me. I was like, I can't even remember that. I've got she will attest to the fact I have a terrible memory. So that was one thing I blocked out, to be honest. So, we'll move on. We love the name Scout.
No, the thing is, it is actually a good name. And I think as much as... I personally very much enjoyed covering Scout, and I think it was quite a popular thing. It was also very brief, and probably 4 or 5 years ago, it doesn't. It is particularly for your audience. I'm certain that no matter how hard MediaWorks tried, I don't think that they're particularly aware that it existed. Now.
I'm actually even wondering if I was overseas. I don't know how long ago. I was like, was I in Melbourne when that happened? Or wasn't? No. Anyway, I've blocked it from my memory. But yeah, those are the four titles. I can talk to you a little bit more about those later. But as far as the process went, so August 3 was my first day in the seat. I mean, I'd done quite a bit of work on the sort of financials of it, but prior to that. But really, August 3, I was like, right, I need a team. So my first step was getting my editors.
And how big is your team, and how did you sort of go about finding them?
Literally picking up the phone. So there's 20 of us. I should count. I should look at the org chart, shouldn't I? I did count. But it was what I found fascinating was how many people didn't want to come back 5 days a week, even though they've been without an income for 4 months or whatever it was, that people have really, reevaluated what's important, which includes their time. So lots of 3 and 4 days, and it's great to be able to have people working more remotely now. That's something that's happened this year. We used to always be quite staunch about people being in the office, and now I'm like, whatever you want. I'm very relaxed about that. But it was really picking up the phone. I mean, some people reached out to me. I started with the editors. And went from there. So it was really, I think it was a week of me just literally picking up the phone and ringing people. A couple of people went, your timing's terrible, you're a week too late, because, there are other people recruiting by them. But we've got a fantastic team. That's the thing about the closure of Bauer is, there were, 240 odd people, but there was so much talent in that building. So it was great to be able to pick up the phone to these women and give them this opportunity again, and so I'm so grateful so many of them took a leap of faith, because obviously there was nothing, they didn't know what it was. There was nothing tangible to say, come and work for this magazine. It was just we didn't even have a name at that stage for the magazine.
In some ways that attracts like a particular kind of person who finds that interesting and not scary.
Yeah. One of them in particular was Vanessa Marshall, the editor of Haven. So she had other opportunities, to be honest, at the same time, and so mine was literally, I was on a roadie down, and I was with my mother-in-law down. I'd taken her on a trip to Wellington, and we were in the Wairarapa on a bad phone line, and I rang her up, and it was based on a phone call. She I was about to do something else, but this is what I want to do this. So for people to take that leap of faith, it's pretty amazing.
You feed off that energy, right?
Yeah.
How have you? So obviously, I mean, assembling a team and developing titles is one thing, and not a small one. But there is also ultimately the model requires distribution, and it requires sales.
It's new for me. The distribution side of it's new for me.
So how have those two pieces received you? Like, do you feel? What's your level of confidence like in this?
Yeah, well, from a distribution point of view, it was fascinating. So, I mean, because I'd gone through the acquisition, I'd sort of been on the phone to lots of people, like the distributors, printers, that side of it. So, I'd already, was sort of I knew more than I did 6 months earlier, I suppose, about that process. But I needed to go and do the print negotiations and the distribution negotiations. One of the key things was going to via Avato to our key supermarkets, for example. And so those conversations, I was just so heartened. So even going into the countdowns of the world, and you're going with a title that doesn't exist, and it's really competitive normally for those sort of pockets. I mean, obviously they've been emptier than usual this year, those magazines' pockets, but they were so encouraging and just so excited. I mean, I guess they know me and my team, but they also know that magazines are having a bit of a moment here and globally. People are, this year, independent local magazines are doing particularly well. The distributors have said that some of those publishers are saying they haven't seen, revenue like this for years. It's great for them. So I guess the people that are deciding where you placed at checkout know that mags are doing well and are saying, come on board. So I've been really, Countdown, for example, has given me premium checkout for women for the first 3 months at checkout. That for me is amazing. I thought I'd end up in the magazine aisles. But yeah,
because those checkout spots are pretty key.
Yeah.
And in some ways, you've just shown me the cover. It does feel like you haven't gone to replicate the look and feel of Women's Day, Women's Weekly, and so on. It feels like it's almost... Because the demographic of those magazines was relatively old. It feels like you're potentially trying to shift younger. There's something about the masthead and the layout that feels like a hybrid of that and something which is a bit more kind of clean in design.
That's true. So, I mean, I'm a fortnightly magazine, which hasn't been done before. Everyone's received that reasonably well. They're like, what? But, and the reason for that, the Haven, Scout and Thrive are all monthly magazines. Woman I've done as a fortnightly magazine, and I've done it because it should be a monthly in many ways, look and feel. Like traditionally, it's perfect bound, it's glossy, it's the pagination is higher. But I just didn't want to wait a month. That's ridiculous. But I thought, I've come from a weekly background. I'm like, there are so many New Zealand stories to tell. I'm not waiting a month between magazines. And weeklies, in some ways, I think there are lots of weeklies and they do their job wonderfully well. But also, I'm keenly aware that as much as I love my listener, it sits, I don't get through all of those these days. It was launched in a world where there wasn't, all my digital subscriptions to get through as well. I've got so much to read that, love it dearly, but I don't really read 52 weeks a year. So I just thought fortnightly was a nice rhythm. I really did. I thought it sort of sits between the weeklies and the monthlies, and I've done that all the way along. So the pagination sits between the weeklies and the monthly. The price of the magazine sits between the weeklies and the monthlies. And I think the look and feel sits somewhere probably more in a monthly. I want it to be a bit more modern and contemporary than what we've seen out there. So, yeah, even the design sits somewhere between a weekly and a monthly, but probably leaning towards more like a monthly. So, yeah, I've made it up. Can you tell?
Yeah, but that must be a lot of fun after coming from being the custodian of these... ultimately, like there was a lot that you'd be very scared to change.
Yeah.
Whereas this, you're not changing anything. You're inventing.
No.
Have you enjoyed that process?
I really have. I guess I think the magazine is probably more reflective of me and my interests and my loves than any of the other magazines I've edited, I guess. It's more true to me, is what I should say. It's more true to what I'm interested in and what I hope women will be interested in. But ultimately, they will tell me. They tell you when that barcode gets, bleeped and you see the sales come in, they'll soon tell you what they like.
That must be even more so. That there's the emotion of the first one going to bed, and then there's the pure terror of the first sales.
And who knows? Totally. I've had to do guesstimates, but who knows? Fingers crossed. I hope people love it, but it's definitely fresh. I know it's fresh.
The Fold is brought to you by Bauer Media, making brands unmissable and public spaces better across Aotearoa, with over 4,000 out-of-home advertising sites nationwide across both street furniture and retail centres. I'm super grateful to Bauer Media for enabling us to make unmissable connections with Kiwis.
Raising capital or taking your business to the world? Investment Fix has the lowdown on everything you need to make it happen. This season, we're exploring the US market, the opportunities it offers, what it takes to grow a business there, and the best way to approach investors. Join some of the superstars of the investment and business world as they share advice from their time in the US so you can make your mahi count in this massive market. The Investment Fix podcast, brought to you by Invest New Zealand. Tune in today.
But I actually walked out my gate this morning to come here and I went, maybe I should have gone with the blue cover. But, it is what it is now. I've got to leave it to the universe.
Yeah.
But yes, so I guess there's a distribution, circulation, that's that side of things, and we've been fantastically supported, and I think we've been wonderfully supported because we're local. And then, of course, there's the advertising side of things. And I guess what I wanted was a couple of key launch partners on board, and I was really heartened. I mean, some people have reached out to me, which has been amazing. I wasn't on LinkedIn till the last few months, and thank goodness I was, because I've, a couple of advertisers have come to me via that. So we've got, and then there are a couple of advertisers I just really wanted to approach because I just love them as brands and thought they'd be a wonderful affiliation. So we have the Market and Resine as launch partners, and they've got a fantastic offering throughout both our print and digital platforms. So that's great. But yeah, quite a few other advertisers in there too. So I think once you could actually show the magazine to people, then there'll be different kinds of interests. But yeah, the first issue we've done really well. But now we've got to keep it up.
So I want to touch briefly on your career to rewind a few decades, because I agree that the independent media in New Zealand feels like it's having a moment, and for a while there it felt like the spin-off felt like quite a lonely thing, and now suddenly there's Simon Fowler-Green's got his thing. There's the new Metro, launched the new North and South team, the School Road ensemble. There's just like a lot of energy in the sector, which is awesome, but it almost feels like it's grown out of a necessity. I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about when you first came into the media, like the true, because you've worked publicist on Shortland Street, you've worked around homes, and one at TVNZ during when it was just a behemoth, like in terms of the way it dominated the culture like no other. Describe that scene and when media was king in a way that it just it's different now. It is
really different.
Beast.
It really is different. I've never actually thought. I don't reflect that much, to be honest, Duncan. I'm always too busy moving forward. But yeah, I started out. My dad's a journalist, and my brother's a journalist. We were sort of in media and newspaper family, really. And I started out often little suburban newspapers, and then very quickly. Could see the space between media and entertainment, which led me to publicity, and I ended up via publicity, ending up at TVNZ quite quickly. I don't know. I guess I was mid-20s, I think. I was the TVNZ publicity manager in the Homes era. God, it was fun. It was great. Richard and Judy were there. Karen and Jim were doing the weather. I just look back then and I just think, the audacity of who I was. I mean, I was really young to be the TVNZ publicity manager managing these people's media careers. It's quite funny. I look back now and go, who did I think I was? Yeah. But I was always a bit young for what I was doing all the way through. I don't know why. I think it was my mum. I just always thought I could do anything. I put girls. There was always those bumper stickers saying, girls can do anything. I think I grew up believing it. Yeah. I was my late 20s. That's where I was, between TVNZ, Shortland Street. I did get brought into magazines for a short time by Wendell Nissen as her deputy. I sort of moved across from TVNZ, but again, the magazines so powerful back then. Women's Day. So I was the deputy on New Zealand Women's Weekly and Women's Day for Wendell for a short time before going back to publicity. So TVNZ was a great time. I just learnt so much. So yes, it was the other side of the media, but obviously because I had been a journalist, I understood what journalists wanted. So I was often I was always knocking on the door of the listener editor saying, making their jobs easy. I guess that's what I was doing. I was just after cover. I was always after covers. Just want to cover. And I was like, I always had these ideas and, I'll do the photo shoot. I'll organise the photo shoot. But yeah, those shoots with Jane Usher taking Paul Holmes's, portraits, and we did those a couple of times for the listener, and Pamela Sterling coming along and writing the stories, So I was sort of involved from the other side from quite a young age. They were good times. I remember going in a chopper to get Judy Bailey to come back to do her One News ad campaign photos from her from the Coromandel, because every year, it didn't matter how many times the stars said, I'm going to be on holiday on these dates, So Archies would always leave the ads to the last minute, and suddenly I remember choppering over to get her and choppering back. Not those budgets these days.
That's the thing, right? Like, and the budgets were a reflection of the power and the centrality of the media. Now it doesn't feel. It's strange, right? Because I don't think that the media is drastically less consumed. It just can't command the space or the income as of right, and that changes the feeling.
It does change it. I mean, we did a story on Renee Chignell for Women's Day last year before, and looking back at all that old footage of Renee Chignell when, all the cameras and the journalists chasing her to the court, there was just so much competition, wasn't there, for current affairs in particular. So, I do miss that. There were just docos on night after night, and there was just so many current affairs shows. I think it was a really exciting time in the 90s, the last millennium.
I know, but then, and then now, it almost feels like the only people left are just tragic, who like can't leave,
Yeah, I mean, that's how I felt about magazines for a little while. That's what I used to say. I was like, oh my gosh, lots of mates, they're all going off to do the, corporate PR jobs. I'm just like, I'm just going to write. I just love this. I'm just going to write it as long as I can.
Yeah, well, that's because I feel like in some ways, like the sometimes when I think about it, it's like we're surrounded by ghosts of like amazingly talented people who are working in various comms jobs or working for the government in comms. And, they were, they're like that. There is something that's sort of sad about that, but then there's also just there's like a beautiful kind of gallows camaraderie of the left behind.
Yeah, and they're lovely, the people that have reached out over the last year from those gallows. Yeah. And so I did that, and that was fantastic. Then I went to Channel 7 in Australia. Yeah, I did a bit of, I worked for South Pacific Pictures I wanted to do a bit of film publicity before I left, so I set up my own little publicity thing between magazines and heading to Australia. And then, I was at Channel 7 Melbourne. I was their publicity manager for 5 years. And again, it was a fat time for television. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just the big shows, the big stars, the big media.
Does Australia still have some of that feeling that
they did
90s?
when I was there.
Yeah.
I've been back a while now. So that was, I went in the early 2000s. So, you could never spend your budget, put it that way. You could throw so many parties, and you could throw send out all the PR paraphernalia in the world, and entertain to your heart's content. You could never use that budget. It was amazing, and of course, it was all based on relationships. At the end of the day, it was actually just as a publicity manager, having a great relationship with the editors of the newspapers. I think the thing about Australia is there's actually not that many outlets. Do you know what I mean? Like if you're in a town like Melbourne, you've got the 2 big newspapers, big radio stations. It's interesting that you come back to New Zealand where there's dozens and dozens and dozens of radio stations. It's different in Australia, the media.
And consolidation is often something that people talk about needing, and it does feel like having a thin or spreading the audience thinly doesn't. There are good and bad things about it, but it doesn't always help. I had a couple of opportunities to come back from Australia. To edit magazines. I never edited a magazine. I'd only ever been a deputy. I didn't really know what I was doing at that time in magazines. But it was the New Zealand Women's Weekly that was the one that got me back. It was Rick Neville, your journalist Alice Neville's dad, rang up and said, would you come back and do New Zealand Women's Weekly? And I was just like, oh, that one pulled at my heart. It's just it still pulls at my heart today. So that's why I came back, really. And because I had a little kid at that stage that... I think everyone comes home when they have children, don't they? I came back to edit the weekly. So, that's and then was a bit more grown up and just stayed in these jobs for a long time. But I went from the Women's Weekly. Then of course came over to edit. We headed over to ACP, as it was then, to edit Women's Day, and then we had that wonderful window where we got to buy the New Zealand magazine, so that was fantastic. That was like a dream come true, because then I had both these magazines I loved, and it's funny, when I was at New Zealand Women's Weekly as editor, there was always this pressure to down-age the weekly and take on Women's Day, and of course they had this big project research piece I had inherited, which was always about making it younger and funkier, and of course that's not who the New Zealand Women's Weekly reader is, and so to actually, when it came over to ACP as it was then, and I got to pull the Women's Day brands apart, Women's Day and New Zealand Women's Weekly, overseeing both of them, that was a fantastic career movement, because it really meant I could let the New Zealand Women's Weekly be true to its readers. I loved that. That was really great. Yeah, so it's weird, because there is this, sometimes in media brands, having a crosstown rival is a brilliant thing, and you see it throughout our media, like the Stuff Herald, TV3, TVNZ, the My FM Flavour, but fundamentally, like at times you can stare too closely at them and not actually just go to your natural position, just be. Absolutely. And, so often you'd see those, I used to do this drive by the dairies, look at the posters on a Sunday morning when we're all in competition, and New Idea was in the market too. I'd always get up early and go and look at the posters outside. Biggest disaster when 2 or 3 of them looked exactly the same, and so there was always this brand confusion between which magazine was which was ridiculous for such powerhouse brands. So, I loved being able to separate them. That was great. So now you're with the new titles. They are run out of and part owned by.
It's Greg Partington.
Right.
So they don't come under Stanley Street. We're based at Stanley Street. There are several businesses based at Stanley Street, and this is one of them.
Has there been any tension in terms of even that level of proximity and shared ownership from knowing that media agencies, ad agencies can be quite competitive and prickly around that kind of thing?
A couple of the guys have asked that question, but only a couple, because I've been around a lot of agencies in the last few weeks, and a couple have asked that question. And I guess, to be honest, the agency team at Stanley Street are pretty staunch about staying completely agnostic. They are very protective of that, and I respect that, and I kept well away, to be honest. So they're probably the last people I'll end up talking to as far as clients go. To be honest, I think I'm respectful of it. I'm mindful of it. They're mindful of it. We're all mindful of it.
If the state gets on you, then it'll be quite hard for both parties to retain business. Right?
So no, we're not. Yes, we're based in the same building. I mean, to be honest, we're Stanley Street, the building, the people in the building has been incredible, and I think everybody will benefit for this, is their digital capacity is amazing. So as far as the building of websites, the social, those sites, those are where, that's the resource that is wonderful to be able to pull on. But the agency teams stay very separate.
Good to hear. And let's talk about digital, right? Because there was a time when it was thought the print magazine would just sunset, and obviously that there are less titles than there were 10 years ago, and certainly less copies printed. But there is a stubbornness to the magazine consumption, which obviously is why you're happily launching 4 titles. But how does the digital piece sit with that? What is the function of digital for School Road?
To be honest, I think Greg probably would have launched some digital-only magazines. That's really his passion. I'm not supposed to talk about Greg, am I? But anyway, sorry, Greg. He's really passionate about digital magazines, but he really strongly felt that you need to offer digital subscriptions from the get-go, which is quite unusual here, I guess, in New Zealand. But he just believes you've got to value that content and can't give it away. And so it'll be a slow game, but we will have digital subscriptions right from the get-go. So you can get your print magazine, you can get your print from the retail, you can get your print subscription, you can get your digital subscription, or both. So we will have...
and will that be like sort of cross-titles or individual
No, individual.
Titles?
I mean, and that's for me is a joy, because I've come from where we had all our brands hubbed.
Yeah.
And it just, to me, never quite worked.
They don't get to hold their own identity,
and these great brands and such different audiences, and even our language, our tone, how we speak to readers is so different with each brand. So actually be able to have our own brands is fantastic. So that was a huge attraction to me for the job, to be honest, because I've got lots to learn in that digital space as well, and that's where some of Greg's team can really help us. So I'm really excited about what they can bring to magazine publishing. So we've looked at lots of overseas models, and I've got sort of launch partners on for the first couple of months because we need to grow. It's a startup. There's only so many of us. There's not huge numbers. I don't have the same resources that I've had previously. So I have to be realistic, but I still want to. There'll be really interesting ways we talk to our audiences via digital over the next few weeks. You'll see it. It's quite exciting, actually. So it's hard to talk about it without actually seeing it. It's funny because now the magazine's gone. I mean, I've had people working on the building of the website for weeks and weeks and weeks, and the digital editor's been flat out. But of course, we've been getting that print magazine to the market, to the printer. Now I'm conscious. I'm saying we probably just need to spend a couple of hours together today because it's happening any second. So, but no, I'm really excited about how things are looking as far as the websites go. But as far as content goes, it's going to take us a while. But there will be lots of free content on our websites too. So a digital subscription will unlock absolutely everything, but there'll still be plenty of free content for people that just want to be part of our brand community without paying.
Love them.
Yeah. I have to say one of the things that I have been really amazed with in recent weeks is the amount of support for us from people reaching out to try and help us. I've never had that. I guess I've always worked for someone else. And the likes of Sinead Boucher at Stuff have been amazing. She's just said, what can we do to help? But I'm not used to getting offered that kind of help. But I guess it's, she's actually in my first issue. I've done a story on her because I find her fascinating. The fact what she's done this year is incredible. But aside from the story, she was the one that reached out to me initially and just said, we're really excited about what you're doing, and so are a lot of women I know. If there's anything I can do to help, please let me know. And I've never really asked for help before, but I've said, okay.
Well, it does feel like that the media in New Zealand has, in a relatively short period of time, gone from that sort of viciously competitive and enjoying.
It's still there, don't worry.
It's absolutely still there, but there's also a sense that our real competition is, headquartered in Silicon Valley, and it's that it's you wouldn't cheer if your crosstown rival died, because it would only feel like your day was coming sooner, and there is the competition versus the let's just we all sort of the more of us there are, the better. Like we want. It feels like the project is convince New Zealanders to continue to rapaciously consume New Zealand media, and then we'll fight over those people once we have them. But the big project is keeping them in the tent.
I totally agree. And women, I think people, I know, the fact that we're all about New Zealand women's stories, I think has been really welcomed, because I know that the mags I used to work on are having to take so much more Australian content. So that for me was I was deeply
It's not
concerned.
a small thing.
I think we lost so many New Zealand women's voices this year, not just through all the writers that suddenly lost their jobs, but the people that actually got to share their stories. They suddenly didn't have a vehicle for so many of those stories. So having all the space to actually just talk to New Zealand women is fantastic, and I think that's also, it's local, but also I think people can see that is needed right now more than ever, to be honest.
All right, I think that's a great place to leave it. Thank you so much, Sido. I know that you've got a packed day and another 3 magazines to get out the door, so I'll let you do that, but thank you so much for coming out.
Hey, thank you, Duncan.
That was The Fold, brought to you by our partners at Bauer Media, making brands unmissable and public spaces better across Aotearoa. Huge thanks to Bauer Media for sponsoring this episode of The Fold and enabling us to make unmissable connections with Kiwis.
Ready to rediscover the joys of cycling? With over 300 kilometres of cycle paths across Tāmaki Makaurau, jumping on your bike and going for a ride is such a fun way to discover the city from a different perspective. Cycling is getting more and more popular across Auckland, so now's a great time to join the hype and give cycling a go. Head to at.govt/cycling to find your nearest cycleway today. The Spin-Off Podcast Network.